Well, Brother Chris,
Brother Justin, you ready?
have you seen Midnight Mass?
I have. In fact, I recommended it to you after the third showing.
Mm-hmm.
We'll
see if your recommendation holds firm.
Yeah.
Now that we've watched the whole thing.
Right. And Quinn, who won't finish it but has watched most of the episodes, she can give a little bit of her 2 cents.
So we're going to start off with the notice that this is just going to be a complete spoiler-heavy review. A spoiler-heavy, Catholic-focused review of Midnight Mass. All right, so here's the introduction. An elderly priest goes on vacation to Israel, where he's brutally attacked by Nosferatu, whom the priest, although he's been active in Catholic ministry for literally decades, mistakes to be an angel. The priest sneaks the ancient bloodsucker back to his hometown, and even though the priest's skin starts burning in the sunlight, he still doesn't realize that the Nosferatu demon thing is a vampire, because apparently the priest has never watched a single vampire movie in his entire life.
His 85-plus-year-old life.
The priest, who apparently has Homer Simpson-level reasoning abilities, comically continues to aid and abet the monster's evil desires.
But the way you introduced it sounds so stupid, but I actually liked it.
Okay, so that's definitely an oversimplified and comical take on the show, but I mean, it's not.
I started off with the spoilers, though. That was there you go.
I wrote the intro, but despite having written the intro and it sounding the way that it does, I actually did like the show overall. I thought it was a very fun ride until we get to the end.
Right,
and
we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that.
And I guess that was true for a lot of people. I saw that the Rotten Tomatoes thing was 98 or 89%, so pretty high level. And it did reach number 1 on Netflix for a couple of months until Squid Games came along, actually, and knocked it out. And it was still in the top 10 until at least just a week or so ago.
Oh, really?
So
I didn't know it was doing that well.
Yeah. And it's funny because I had seen the title for weeks and never even clicked over to see what it was about. And then finally one day, I just kind of out of boredom, I'm like, what is this one? And a priest? It sounds kind of mysterious. So I turned it on, and I actually was hooked. That's why, like, by I think the 3rd episode is when I told you about it and said, you got to watch this. It's pretty cool.
So it's safe to say that you and I really like paranormal movies.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I love horror movies. My wife loves horror movies. It's like one of our favorite things to watch of all time. We absolutely love that genre of just scary movies. Mm-hmm. So we were really hooked on this one too.
What did she think about it?
She felt probably exactly the same way that we do. So I think I speak for her. Mm-hmm. All of my opinions are pretty much the same. We got all the way through it to the end, and then there's a distinct moment at the end. Actually, it's a distinct several moments because, holy cow, the moment that we're going to talk about that we didn't like, it goes on forever.
Lasts for like 5 minutes long.
Yeah, it's like a 5-minute diatribe at the end. But
the
ride is fun.
And it is making the news because in our local diocese newspaper for San Diego Diocese, or actually our Sunday Visitor, last week's thing, they're doing a whole thing about the occult because it being near Halloween, and they did a whole review of it as well. And generally speaking, they thought it was actually positive, the people who spoke about it. But there are some critiques that I thought was interesting. Huh. Actually, I'll just mention one right now before we actually start talking about some of the things. Father David Guffey, I never heard of him before the interview, and this comes from the article in our Sunday Visitor, so the quote is from that. He's a Holy Cross priest, and he directs the Family Theater Productions, and he's been a consultant on actually several horror genre themes as a Catholic consultant. And here's what he wrote. He said, quote, "Supernatural and spiritual horror films are sometimes useful in that they dramatize the reality that the forces of evil are present in our world and impact our lives. Where they often fall short is in their failure to acknowledge that the forces of love, God, are always stronger and always prevail. The best horror films for Christians show how faith, commitment, and sacrifice made in love can unleash the saving power of God." And another commentator said, "The horror genre does often attract us because of the human fascination with the supernatural realm, as well as the acknowledgement of real evil in the world, two very Catholic concepts."
Well,
So.
I agree with them to a point,
Mm-hmm.
because once you get to that point, in the last episode, you see that the series kind of veers away from God as the answer and into something much different.
Right.
And so, I mean, if you take the series at face value, then it's like, I don't know how you could come out of it really going, oh yeah, the series is all about how God can like help us. And
In fact, maybe let's start with God, right? Because through the characters, primarily Riley, who, if you haven't seen it, he was a former Catholic. He left this tiny town, fishing village he grew up in on this remote island of Crockett Island, which is not real. I did look it up. Doesn't really exist.
I assumed it wasn't real. A whole island that burns.
He kills someone while drunk driving, and during the 4 years he spends in prison, he loses his faith, basically comes back an atheist. At the time he returns, his, I guess, sweetheart from when they were younger, who had left earlier, has returned to the island as a teacher, and she's pregnant, and they kind of reconnect. And where he's lost his faith, at least in the beginning, she seems to have regained her Catholic faith. So in some of the earlier episodes, of the earlier episodes, they do have these discussions about God and death and such that at least were, I thought, moving in the right direction. You have the atheist arguing it, her arguing about love and everything, and him hoping it's like that way. Mm-hmm. So one thing that was interesting too is, I know Catholics are totally shown to be fanatics, which I think is really funny because at least in the modern American church, that's about the farthest from Catholicism we find are the super zealous Catholics. And I don't mean this as a major thing because I don't mind in general, but I did think it was ironic that the Muslim religion was the only one shown as somewhat being rational.
Yeah. So I was going to say, in terms of things that we liked about the show, fun vampire stuff,
right?
Really cool effects. When you start seeing for the first time that the priest can't put his hand into sunlight, he's like hiding in his room, and he puts his hand out into the sunlight, and it like burns. That was kind of cool,
right?
The effects of people who have been totally taken over by the vampire blood, burning up in the sunlight when the sun rises.
I did like they never actually call him a vampire. He's always referred to as the Angel.
The Angel. Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was interesting because he clearly is a vampire. And actually the director, when asked point blank, said yes, he's a vampire. But we didn't use the word because it would pigeonhole the story before anyone watched it. And in that, I thought it was good because, of the blood, he drinks blood. Mm-hmm. He doesn't look like the suave, stereotypical, or now teenage, sexy vampire. Yeah. He's like
this is not
humanoid,
Edward Cullen.
Beast-like looking.
Not Edward Cullen.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Not the new Batman.
No. But it's obvious he's a vampire.
Right.
The only thing that's missing is he doesn't turn into a bat and hang upside down in a closet somewhere, right? But, I mean, he can't go in the sun. He feasts on people's blood from their jugulars.
Right.
And then he brings them to the point of dying and then revives them so that they become his slaves by feeding them with his blood.
Right.
So
he seems immune to at least normal death. Like they shoot him with a pretty high-powered weapon.
Yeah.
Like point blank into his head.
But don't cut little holes in his wings.
Yeah.
Because those don't heal. Did the director explain that? Have you watched anything? Like, why does this thing survive? She was shooting a Mini 14 at the thing,
right?
So she's shooting like military grade ammunition at this thing's back, and it doesn't kill it, doesn't even phase it. Really, she shrugs it off, right?
Yeah.
Because I think she shoots him in the back while he's feasting on someone,
and he
right?
just kind of goes.
He just whatever. He shot me in the back, but then later on, the female character, I forget her name. Do you remember?
Aaron, I think. Aaron Green, yeah.
Yeah, she's getting feasted on, and then it's like she knows that it's going to try and fly away from the sunlight, so she cuts the little slits in its wings so he can't gain lift and fly away. And somehow that doesn't heal.
Well, that's like Quinn.
I don't understand that.
Quinn, who always ruins these type of movies because she's so rational, was talking about how come no one got affected the same way. Like, it took the priest a while to burn in the sun, but Riley burns in the sun the first time he, goes into the sun.
I was thinking about this because the thing that, I mean, we're jumping all over the place because it's a 7-hour long miniseries.
Right.
But, I mean, the basic the basic thrust of everything is said in the introduction that we did to this episode of the podcast. But yeah, you have the priest who is brought to the brink of death, but I don't think he dies yet when he meets the thing in the cave, when he meets the vampire in the cave.
Right. And then he dies later.
He dies later.
So
and
maybe
it's
that's
only
why.
after that he can't go in the sunlight.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah. Those of us who've watched the whole
Because
show.
he died. No.
He died when he
died.
spit up all the blood and he died.
But why did he die? That never
So
explained
no,
why he
that's
died.
the question that I
Did
want
he
an
needed
answer
blood
to.
so much that he just ended up dying because he didn't get enough blood? But the thing is that nothing happens. He gets revived.
Well, up to that point, he technically wasn't a vampire, I guess, because he had not actually died yet. So, because that's why at the end, when he forces them that they have to drink the poison and die before they can actually, before the blood makes them a vampire. But also the weird way it affected, like one girl gets the ability to walk again. One lady gets so young, she's like younger than her daughter by the end. One just has her eyesight. Like there was no rhyme or reason. Like everyone just got healed, but no specific, like
And
in their own way.
Why is pregnancy healed?
So they explain that, the doctor. So basically what happens is you have the Nosferatu goes and starts draining its blood in secret into the vials that we use at Mass that hold the sacred vessel.
The priest was doing it.
Yeah, he was putting instead of wine, he was cutting that wine with Nosferatu blood.
Yeah,
which is horrible. Like, if any priest who felt that he needed to do that in order to affect miracles would know that like God wouldn't do that through the breaking of the rubrics and illicitly, I guess, messing with the sacred vessels and stuff. But anyway, so Nosferatu blood is being given out to the entire congregation in this little town, which is most of the town in this little remote island. And some people, the blood has this healing factor, but I think it's explained that the reason why that little girl starts to walk again, because she's paralyzed, she receives communion, it's got the blood in it, and she's able to walk again. It's because I think the priest says that what it does is it brings you into your ideal self, whatever age that was and whatever state of being you were in. But what it almost acts as if like it's ridding your body of corruption, but also like things that are parasites, like things that are living off of you. And so the doctor mentions in one episode that that's why the baby disappears. It's because whatever is in that Nosferatu blood like rejected the baby and ate it up because the baby was living off the mom as a host.
I guess in a broad sense you could say they all went backwards physically.
Yeah.
Some to the point where before they were shot and were unable to walk, the dad whose back was no longer hurting, the mom's eyesight returns. And then in the case of the one woman who was getting communion every single day, although we don't discover why at the end he's so focused on her, she's the one who retrogressed, I guess, the most, way down to when she was almost like a teenager.
Well, and we find out
that was his whole point.
Yeah, we find out that she was an ex-lover of the priest.
Right.
And that the doctor is their daughter. And she never knew that he was the father. And I don't know. That's an interesting...
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like that little twist. It was kind of thrown in at the end, like, all of a sudden, though.
Right.
You know?
What's his motive?
Yeah, it was like episode 7.
So,
really?
but my question is that the blood that was consumed by the mom would have been consumed by the baby, too.
I guess so.
So if the baby goes backwards in time like she does and everyone else...
Yeah, or...
In that case, it's non-existent. In her case, it's before she's pregnant.
I guess so.
In the paralyzed girl's case, to the point where before she had been wounded, like that's why I think it brings them all backwards in time. Maybe depending how much they take, it affects them more or less.
Well, the doctor explained it as the Nosferatu blood probably was just trying to rid your body of anything that's trying to drain it. You know.
Now, how did it eat like 100 cats in like one night?
So that is another question that I got.
But did anyone notice that the cats had? Oh no, it was.
They did. They noticed that the cats were all mangled up and that there was no blood in them anymore. So, like angels do throughout Scripture. They find feral cats to suck the blood. So just for fun, I wrote a scriptural take on the Midnight Mass encounter, if you'll indulge me for a second. So this is from the book of Midnight Mass, chapter 3. As I stumbled into the abyss of the cave, behold, before me, shrouded in darkness, stood a naked creature of human form. His legs were long. The toes of his feet were webbed, and the whole of his body and 2 wings had the appearance of tough leather. He had a face like a reptile, with 2 eyes that glowed bright between 2 pointed ears. No words did he speak to me, but he hissed like a ferocious cat. And as soon as I had gazed upon the creature, he attacked me, with clawed fingers and fangs like a snake. He bit into my neck, and, as I cried out in agony, he drained me of all but the scarcest of life. Then, before I yielded my last breath, he slit his own wrist with the point of his claw and drained his blood into my mouth, which revived me. Upon my waking, I was suddenly youthful again, and, although this creature did not once utter the Lord's praise, not once, nor did he take any steps to comfort me, nor did he even speak any words whatsoever, I knew that this creature must be an angel of God. Therefore, I stuffed him in a large suitcase and shipped him back to my hometown, for the angel was afraid of sunlight, and I knew that international customs would be too incompetent to discover him. End of verse. So
That's really good, actually. Oh.
that doesn't sound like, maybe when I wrote that, it was because I was researching scriptural passages about angels that might have informed sort of how they developed the vampire in this series. And so many of them, it's like you could never draw this out of the Bible, with one exception. There was Ezekiel chapters 1-3, where Ezekiel is met by the cherubim, and the voice of God speaks from the vision of the cherubim, and it's kind of a freaky thing. You have these beings that he says they look like humans, but they've got like the legs of calves and 4 faces and 4 wings, and they kind of connect at the wing points, 4 of these angels, into like one big wheel, and then there's this big fire in the middle of them, and then they have, like, the voice of God has him do, Ezekiel, something strange. An angel presents to him a scroll, and he has to eat it. Mm-hmm. And when he eats it, it tastes like delicious honey to Ezekiel. And then the mouth of God says, you need to go and be my voice to the Israelites, basically. And depending on whether or not they follow what you tell them, that I tell you to tell them, that determines their judgment, So I could see how, if you weren't, I guess, a scriptural scholar, reading something like that, you could go, oh yeah, that's not a big stretch from big demon bat thing being mistaken as an angel.
Yeah.
Except there's no voice of God. There's no comfort. There's no freedom of choice, right? The demon just attacks him. And angels do violent things throughout the scriptures, especially the Old Testament. But the complete lack of human agency, it's just this demon, the vampire thing, just flies into people's homes, nabs them out, starts ripping their necks apart. There's no aspect of like will or judgment in this at all. So that was one of the things that really bothered me about the show. Was you've been a priest for how many years? Like 60, 50 something years?
He was 80 something years old, I think.
Yeah, the priest that this really centers on, the one who finds the vampire in the first place, he's been in ministry for decades. And although in his old age, he's been sort of riddled with elderly dementia, right? And he admits as his younger self that he was way far gone. Well, when the demon thing, the vampire, Nosferatu, whatever you want to call him, like revives him and brings him back to being youthful again, well, then all his wits are back. He should know better than to think that this thing is a vampire. That was one of the big hurdles I had to leap over in order to enjoy the show, which is like, how could anyone, not even just a priest, but anyone who's watched a vampire movie, mistake that thing for an angel and not what it obviously is. It bit you in the neck and it sucked all your blood out. That's a vampire, you know?
Did it have to do with what that was saying over the cave? Because didn't he say something about the angel of God over the sign over the cave that he walked into?
Oh, I don't remember.
I don't remember what he said when he found the cave. I don't remember.
No, when he walked, after he was healed, he walked out and he turned around and he said something, and it was something about that over the cave. So it might have been him. But then again, while he was dying, he was saying,
so
it's an angel.
If I walked into St. Peter's Basilica,
and you see that, you're like, that's St. Peter.
and Nosferatu appears from behind the tabernacle, flies at me, and then starts sucking the blood out of my neck with its fangs, I would know this is not an angel. You know what I mean?
Well, I get, like you were saying, suspending. Like we've said, I did actually enjoy the show, but I didn't enjoy it because I thought it was theological. It's like watching, I know some people will hate this, but I liked the show Noah with Russell Crowe.
Oh, the movie?
Yeah.
Dan
If
Aronofsky?
you approached it not pretending it was the biblical story in any way, shape, or form, it's just a cool movie, I thought. So it's the same thing. It's like, I could watch this. Now, one thing that I'd love to ask David Flanagan, the director, who wanted to make this for a long time, and that is, as I was thinking about the angels and stuff, and I nerd out on all the weird, like, demonic stuff. Like, it's just one of my things I've always written on.
Very Irish.
Yeah, the Mesopotamia, because the Mesopotamians, even prior to Israel, have the Lilitu demons, which are where we get the name Lilith, and they were the blood-sucking things. And in fact, the word for demon in Mesopotamian is Galu, which is where we get the word ghoul. It means to seize. And
really?
One connection that's interesting, I don't know if it's purposeful, but if you look at the creature and you look up the demon Pazuzu, who was the leader of the demons of Mesopotamia, he looks kind of like that creature, and he's the demon that's in the Exorcist books and movies.
Oh.
Is Pazuzu. And I didn't know if that was purposeful, if it's just accidental, if they happen to look alike with the wings,
purposeful.
with the crazy face.
It's probably purposeful.
But, yeah, it is. I did do a few things on just kind of, quote, vampirism in Judeo-Christian religion, of which there's really not. But I just found a couple of things that I thought were interesting. The first connection, I think, to the whole vampire idea, at least as it's come down in more modern times, is the whole sacredness of blood and the prohibition from consuming blood. Throughout the Old Testament, it's super strict. The Lord is, if anyone, whether of house of Israel or aliens residing among them, if any of you consumes any blood, I set myself against you, cut you off from the people. For the life of the flesh is the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement. So this idea that blood is so sacred, even animal blood, you're not supposed to consume it. Yeah. And that was important enough that even the original Gentiles who became Christian were not to consume blood. In Acts 15 at the council, because that was understood to be from Noah's time, which was prior to Judaism and therefore prior to the Torah. So you have this kind of blood thing, although beyond that it doesn't really go. Although I know...
well, that's background context too for the Bread of Life discourse.
Right.
Yeah, why it would be so difficult to accept that you need to drink his blood. Obviously they didn't have like the development, theologically speaking, of transubstantiation and kind of the Aristotelian notion of form, matter, substance to explain how you're not formally consuming blood. You're substantially doing it, but that's different from consuming the material.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
And then the second one is just one time in the whole scripture, or twice. In the whole scripture, there's only one mention made of a specific type of Middle Eastern demon. And it comes in Isaiah, and he's really not describing it for the sake of the demons. He's describing the sake of the coming destruction of Edom. And in doing so, he describes it as becoming a wasteland, a desert. And he says, quote, "And there the satyrs shall call to one another, there shall the Lilith repose and find for herself a place to rest." So the desert, seen as this symbolically is the place for the demons. That's why Jesus goes into the desert immediately after baptism to confront Satan. So you have these two weird creatures defined as satyrs and Lilith. The satyr, Sirim, literally means goat demon. And supposedly in the book of Leviticus in the Torah it says, "No longer shall you offer your sacrifices to the goat demons with whom you have prostituted yourselves, but only to the Lord." And it's believed that Azazel, with the connection with the goat and living in the desert, is kind of one of these creatures. So you have this weird, almost like Pan-like creatures like you have in Greece and such. That's why I use the term satyrs. But the second one's the interesting one, Lilith, which comes from Lilitu, which it means disease spirit. And they were originally female demons. Notice even Isaiah refers to herself, who were sexually active with men and then would go and murder children, probably by sucking their blood. And it's believed that the book of Proverbs is referring to her when it calls her a leech, a kula. It says, quote, "There are some, their teeth like swords, their teeth are knives, devouring the needy from the earth, the poor. They are the leech with two daughters who says, 'Give, give.'" So you kind of have this weird, just faintest allusions that really come more from Mesopotamia that was surrounding Israel in this culture. Most of the modern vampire lore really comes from Bram Stoker, who either made it up using Vlad Tepes, this historical Romanian king, but actually a lot of the storyline comes from...
It's Irish, isn't it?
Right, the Irish, and we'll do one on that later.
Okay.
But Evertek, who was an Irish chieftain who came back as an undead and had to be killed by a sword made of sacred yew wood through the heart and all this stuff. But I mean, you can see the connection with later Christianity that Bram Stoker at least worked into it. The weaknesses against crosses and churches, which this creature doesn't have. In fact, he dresses up in priest vestments at one point, which I don't know how he got him over his wings, but that's cool.
I don't know either. He was wearing like a custom Novus Ordo vestment, or possibly he could have been wearing a TLM, like an extraordinary form vestment, right?
Maybe.
He's
into the Latin mass.
Yeah.
That's what the missing vestment was. I can't find the vestment that's the right color.
Oh, that's right.
Angel.
Wait. No, he explains that at the end. He wore the special vestment because he knew that him arriving, he wore white because he knew that him arriving back on the island with miracles was going to be a new Easter for them. But he was keeping it secret in his heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
just like Mary, keeping it in
yeah.
Just kidding.
Only this is like a Mary that wants you to become an undead slave that burns up in the sunlight. Well, what I did like was it seemed, at least at the very beginning, first 2 or 3 episodes, they did a really good job of portraying Catholic liturgy. It was interesting that, and I don't know what who their Catholic consultant was, or consultants if there were more than one, but the fact that they knew that it was odd in this day and in this time frame to be doing the older translation from the Roman Missal,
right? From about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
So within a relatively short amount of time, but to know that kind of,
Yeah, but it's not like a zeitgeist thing, right, out in the secular world to know that, the Catholic Church has changed stuff in their rubrics and whatever. But the show called that out. I thought that the way that the priest was portrayed... They mentioned the vestments and how he was wearing the wrong color.
Yeah, but they had, the woman reading the gospel on Good Friday.
So, but that was because... Wasn't it because the priest was hiding?
He was right there.
Oh, he was right there?
And then she reads it, and then he goes over, and I'm like, why is she reading the gospel?
Well, that Good Friday, though... Oh, no, Easter Vigil is when they do the big...
It was,
hurrah.
Yeah. So I was
that brings me to one other thing that I hated. What was the name of that woman?
Oh, the
church lady.
The church lady.
Bev.
Bev.
Looking at you, camera. I'm being honest with you, audience, that we all know. Every Catholic that's watching this show knows a Bev. Maybe more than one Bev in their parish, okay? But here's what I didn't like about Bev. While people like that exist in, like, outside of the church, they exist everywhere. You know, you get fanatics of every stripe, right? Bevs are not able, at least from my experience in Catholicism for the last 36 years, Bevs don't control the mob. They're not able to sway people's opinion. People don't like Bev.
Right.
You know what I mean? Bev is there yelling at people and telling them they're not holy enough.
Super self-righteous. Yeah.
And every Catholic family goes, all right, kids, we don't want to be like that person. And then we, like, you know, we try and shield our kids from Bev. The Bev that they portrayed here was like the radical, the radical priestess who's able to incite an uprising in a grassroots manner.
Yeah. And
that's exactly what she does. Like, at the end of the show, even though it's the priest who is the arbiter, like he's like the Moses of the vampire. Like, he's the one splattering the blood on the table and on the people. It's the priest. They're so willing to ditch him and follow Bev.
Yeah.
At the very end, it's just, it flips on a dime. And then all of a sudden they start, because of Bev, lighting every building on fire, so they have no shelter when the sun comes up. They
hunting down everybody,
hunting down people. How'd you like that when the altar server kid, at the end, it was kind of comical, actually.
Yeah, I think I killed my mom.
I think I ate my mom.
I think you did too, son.
What?
Sorry.
Aaron and I actually thought that was kind of funny. Like, we were laughing at that when we saw that. But yeah, I didn't like Bev. Like, church lady.
Nobody liked Bev.
It was like,
she kills dogs.
It's
so
like she kills dogs. If Dana Carvey were real as the church lady, we would think he's anything but funny. She's not the person that you want to be around or emulate at all. You know?
And not to get into Catholic stereotypes, but she knew scripture way more than most Catholics.
Way more.
Most Protestants by that.
Well,
anything that came up, she's like, Revelation chapter 4, verse 12.
Lamentations, Deuteronomy.
And you're like, really?
I did take umbrage, though, with her interpretation.
Yeah.
When they had that school meeting,
yeah,
and they're all there talking about the Muslim sheriff is there, and he's complaining because there are Christian Bibles in the public school, right?
Oh no, I think he was complaining that it was being passed out.
They're being passed out.
Yeah.
Okay. But he has a complaint, and then she mentions how she would never teach, like, the story of Lot to children. Obviously not. Yeah. Like, I would never teach the story of Lot and his daughters to children. What? Like, no Catholic would say that. It's like, those are the fun things that we love to teach to people. Like, it was a perverse, weird era, the ancient world. Messed up, you know? They were not in the era of grace. So, a lot of strange things happened. But, yeah, I don't know. Her portrayal was just so over the top. I couldn't, having been Catholic for so long, and having seen Bevs and knowing how people react to them, I couldn't see her being, like, a legit, like, believable character. Yeah.
That's what I was saying earlier. Like, and all the Catholics are I mean, even the priest, although to a much lesser extent, because he actually does sort of have a good heart through it all and good reasoning, you know. But they're all portrayed as these kind of fanatics, you know. And the Muslim guy is the only rational one on the island. But I liked how it began, because I liked the dialogue between, like, the atheist who's still sort of wanting something to be true but can't embrace it yet.
Yeah.
The woman who's kind of gone away and come back stronger, you know, it seems. And so that was good. I liked those kind of things. You know, that doesn't bother me to have people questioning faith and those struggles.
Yeah.
It's just,
I mean, that's real.
Right. And
that's real.
And that's what I like. But then as the show went on, it just kind of devolved more into, you know.
Do we need to talk about it now?
Sure. I guess we can. The final monologue.
The final monologue.
Which she's looking at the stars and cutting the wings and having this epiphany
and imagining herself talking to Riley.
Yeah.
I could not believe that he put that into, just artistically speaking, that was written into that final screenplay was just shocking to me, because it would have been so much better, I think, just from an overall artistic standpoint, if he just left kind of the threads that he was weaving together, just leave them open.
Mm-hmm.
Let the audience come to their own conclusion. But instead, he has the character who's Riley's love interest, the teacher who lost the baby because of the vampire blood.
Who before had spoken about God as love, and death is when all this love comes together.
Complete
So
character
beautiful,
reversal.
Right.
and very true to what we talk about when we say what death is.
Yes.
Being in the arms of God, like that whole. Yeah.
Oh, but when she's really dying, the truth comes out about what she believes. And I mean, it would not only did it ruin, like, if you were to really stake your love of the show on that character's final opinion, which obviously is the director's final opinion,
Right.
and I mean,
He is an atheist and a recovering alcoholic. I did read that.
Yes.
An ex-Catholic. So, yeah, it's probably his direct idea.
so she's on the floor. Nosferatu's sucked all her blood out, and she's about to die. And he kind of flies away, and he's trying to escape the sunlight, but she's cut holes in his wings, so he dies. Or we think he dies.
Right.
Because the paralyzed girl can't walk anymore. So we assume that his power is gone and he's dead. But as she's dying on the ground, she recalls this conversation she had with Riley. And Riley asks her, "What is death?" And then she goes into a monologue about how death is just us becoming one with the stars again, because we're all just a dream of the stars, and then my life will continue again in another form, and I won't remember it, but it'll be a continuation of my consciousness, even though it doesn't look. What?
Yeah.
What in the world?
It
like,
turned
you
into
slip
like
into
a
Buddhism.
pseudo-Buddhist. Yeah.
What are you? If that's what she really believed, why was she going to church and receiving communion and then talking about God in the way that she was talking about him before? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But why would they have Riley's death be so different?
I'll have Riley burn up.
Yeah.
No,
that
right
was interesting that he
before.
still saw the girl he always sees
saw
right
the
before
girl.
he went. Right before
And
he
it
died.
was a
right.
peaceful.
So how is that possible
it was a
with
peaceful
her
passing.
idea?
She extends her hand to him. He grabs it. It's like she's helping him move on to the beyond. It was so peaceful.
Yeah.
And then, so why that? And then having this, why the contrast?
I don't know, and that's why it felt so ham-fisted to me. It was that this character who has been shown to be faithfully trying to live her Catholicism and revert, even though she was struggling.
Right.
All of a sudden confesses that it's I don't believe any of this.
Well, I mean, given the fact that she has witnessed all this, she lost her baby was the beginning, and then she witnesses all these people changing, attacking each other. So, I mean, you would have some kind of
But what she's doing as she's dying is recalling a past conversation from when Riley was still alive.
The one that she
Yeah.
had where she
Right,
talked it about.
'cause
Well,
I
her original
watched
answer
it.
was love.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing is it started off so good, like you said, extensive Catholic
Yeah.
symbolism used correctly, at least in those first episodes. But as it went on, the whole idea of God was not shown to be more powerful than evil per se, or even necessarily personal, as Christians believe.
Yeah.
And faith didn't seem to connect with anything except one's own personal ideas about it.
Mm-hmm.
She has hers at the end. Riley has his. All of it's just kind of whatever you believe is sort of equal in spirituality. And something Quinn talked about, which I agree too, is there's no redemption really of any of them. Even Riley, I can't say technically he might sort of. It was a sort of half and half because he saw the girl, so maybe he's redeemed.
But he also sacrificed his life so that he could help
right.
the love interest.
Yeah.
What's her name again?
Aaron.
Your wife's It's your wife's name.
My wife's
I should
name.
remember.
I should probably remember that. Shout out to Cutwater, local San Diego distiller. Delicious. And that's why I didn't remember my wife's name.
Aaron. It's like Tom Hanks.
I knew my wife's name. I didn't know that.
Mr. Short-Term Memory. Have you ever seen that skit from Saturday Night Live?
You know what? Wait a second. My wife's name is Erin. Right. She's a high school teacher. And then the love interest in the show's name is Erin. She's a high school teacher. I really had no reason to. I had every advantage to remember the name of that character. Anyway, where were we?
So I had just mentioned like the redemption part, and you guys were saying, well, he kind of was redeemed.
Yeah,
right. I guess he does.
Yeah, he sacrificed his life to try and help make the point that would save at least somebody. Mm-hmm. You know, how comical was it though that the mob like destroyed their shelter?
Yeah.
Come on.
One thing I did like about
the whole town on fire.
One thing about that whole
they lit that on fire too.
Well, he did. He destroyed it. He and his wife because they killed the daughter and she wouldn't accept the blood.
He and the lover.
Yeah.
That's right. But they burned down the.
The other people burned down the shelter.
Down the shelter?
The Muslim guy.
That's right.
They shot him.
That's
but
right.
He does it and then.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I did like though is there was still some ambiguity in the sense that like at the end, like Riley's parents never hurt anyone, even as vampires. He tells his wife, "You can fight it," and they do. And even at the end, they're singing Catholic hymns as they wait for the sun. So
that was
some characters did stay
cool.
their Catholicism, of what happened. I did like those little sort of things here and there.
And that happened after the monologue,
right?
Which was kind of neat because it was like, okay, the monologue. I mean, basically, the way I've received the show is I ignore the monologue. And then I'm able to do the necessary hurdle jumping in order to enjoy the show as a fun vampire show.
Right.
And it was nice that, that's one of the last things that you hear is at least a couple people retain their humanity and go, no, we have freedom of will. We don't need to go and be ferocious, carnally motivated people.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, Quinn had, she liked the scene with the girl who confronted the dude who paralyzed her when she gets healed.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
What are your thoughts, Quinn?
Well, I just thought it was just very honest and real in the fact that she dealt with her emotions and feelings, still angry. But what she said about, like, if God can forgive you, I can forgive you. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was beautiful. Like, and then for that to spur on the fact that she was trying to let him know he needs to forgive himself. Mm-hmm. And what a breakthrough that was for him, even though it's just sad he's the first to go. Yeah. But
so
he decides not to drink, and then he gets killed by the priest because he goes to tell him he's struggling with not drinking. The priest drinks him.
So how does the weird Buddhist philosophy fit into that notion of forgiveness? But then also, how does it explain, we're all a dream of the stars and all that stuff explain there are undead vampires and a demon Nosferatu thing that is flying around.
And it's forever, right? He's like, he doesn't die or like he can live on forever. So what does that mean?
Why are the stars dreaming of this?
Well, not midnight.
Yeah.
Like nightmares, I guess.
Are the stars sentient? Are they making their own mythos that we're all just living out in some sort of play or what? Because at least Judeo-Christian mythology, like kind of, and our tradition explains this sort of stuff. Like there's supernatural things, there's paranormal things, there's spirits, there are weird manifestations that we may encounter. They're all possible, but We're a dream of the stars.
Yeah, I know.
Or in just
Like-
the idea that part of the dream is us turning.
And I
like,
become the grass,
I
and the
become
grass
grass.
is eaten by the cow, and the cow that is eaten by the human, and It was
The
really a
humans
weird
eat
monologue.
by-
You really gotta listen to
Listen.
the monologue just to be like, what?
It's like 10 minutes.
yeah, it's really
Oh.
long too. You're like this.
Henry V is like 2.5 minutes long. Okay? the St. Crispin's Day speech is like
Right.
2.5 minutes long.
that's
And
interesting.
she's just going off. And they're trying, and I think what made it so ham-fisted too was they tried to pair it with imagery that would try and evoke something from it.
beautiful like
But
universe.
yeah, I know, but people that are like spiritual, like
But that
religious
could also
people-
be the neurons or whatever dopamine firing that he was talking about. Where
Yeah.
your brain is just firing all these drugs at you, and so that's why you feel great or something like that. You know, I don't know. Like that could have been so. In a way, that monologue meant nothing.
You know what would've been
because it's
cool?
just your brain going off.
is if she just transformed after she got bit into her character from Bly Manor. Just her face disappears and she's just trudging along, nabbing people and like dragging them and like sucking their bones out of their bodies or whatever it is that she does. Yeah. I mean, overall, I really like this director's work. I think that it's done really well. I know Quinn didn't like the acting. I like the acting a lot. I thought that the acting was great. I thought that overall the way that it was written was not plot wise, because obviously we've hit on a lot of things that we have issues with in terms of
Right.
actually I don't know that I like how it was written. I like how what was written was acted by the people, and then I like the gravity, like the seriousness that was put into the show, and the reverence that they did show to the liturgy in the first couple episodes was pretty legit.
Now his other vampire one, he did Doctor Sleep, which is connected to The Shining. You know, it's the boy years
did.
later, and
Oh.
but I haven't watched it, but I know that they're being hunted. That
didn't know
boy's
that was
being
him.
hunted by psychic vampires now.
Huh.
So I wonder how that fits in with this thing. I guess if you go back and look in Bly Manor and the other movie, if you look on the scenes in the back room when they have bookcases, Hill House and Bly Manor, there's always a book that says Midnight Mass in the back. He had put it in all of his movies because this was the movie he wanted to make, supposedly, all the research I was
That's
reading.
interesting.
Yeah, but it's in the back, so people thought it was a real book, and he's like, no, I just...
What do you think his motivating factor was? Do you think it was he wanted to do that? He wanted to lead us all through this religious excursion just to hit us with the Buddhist thing at the end to show us that our religion is dumb?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because if that's what he wanted to do, it didn't work. But
Right.
overall, I enjoyed it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, it just felt very sad. Like it was kind of, I don't know, just
Yeah, the two
sad
characters
way
live out of the entire
to
island.
look
Yeah,
at
the two
life.
kids.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? That was another question. We were like, what? Aaron goes, what?
The
What are
ash
those
starts
kids gonna
falling
do?
on other people.
Oh yeah.
You're like-
So then the ashes of their dead family members start falling on them from the sky. That's great. That's
Yeah.
a positive way to end. Like a
The
scene,
last
from,
word-
a
the
scene
la-
from The Man in the High Castle happens.
Yeah.
Basically.
I mean, the last words are, I can't feel my legs. Those are the last words of the
those are
entire
the last words of the whole
movie.
thing. Which I guess is hopeful because the demon is dead, or
Yeah.
the vampire is dead, or whatever it is. But, yeah, okay. So, covered a lot of ground on Midnight Mass.
So, we liked it, but would you recommend it and to Catholics or to who? What would you say about it if you
Well, I
recommend
recommended it to my mom. Big mistake. She made it to episode 3, and when she saw the naked Nosferatu thing in the cave, she was like, "Why did you recommend this to me?" I said, "Well, it's kind of like a mystery. She loves. It's funny because she loves psychopaths and murder mystery stuff and true crime stuff, but." This didn't want to touch it. The supernatural demon thing she was not into. So I think that I would recommend this to people who really like just a good horror series that's a slow burn. They don't like the story completely all up front and then you just rush through it way too quick and it's over. This builds on the ambiance and the whole atmospheric feel of it. It really it's really good. I think that the tone is really good. So if you're
do you
really
think you have to know your Catholic faith pretty well, or do you think that doesn't really matter because it's so kind of heavy-handed that you can't miss the like, this isn't Catholicism at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea for people who watch this to, if you're prone to taking things at face value and being emotionally upset by stuff like that, know your Catholic faith.
Yeah.
Know your Catholic faith before watching it, because it does portray a gullibility that, contrary to popular belief about Catholics, is just not there.
Yeah.
You know, a Catholic sees that thing in a cave and you're gonna run.
Yeah.
You're just not gonna. You're not gonna.
Even Catholic culture, like one of the things I brought up in the beginning, I'm like, no one ever asked me, so you didn't go to confession or didn't go to communion. Like, I have never. I mean,
Yeah.
Chris
I
said
think the assumption is if you don't go to communion, that people go, whoa, they take it really seriously. They know that they've got issues, and
they
don't bother
come
them.
and ask you, hey, how come you didn't go to communion? I'm like, you like avoid that.
Although I go to communion even if I haven't gone to confession, because I'm worried what people will think. I don't think they'll come say anything to me, but that's my own inner like, why isn't Chris going?
Real talk. Sometimes that happens. Where you're like, I probably shouldn't, but I don't want people to think weird. Yeah. So then you like go and you go to confession ASAP right afterwards.
But Quinn's super holy. We've always established
Quinn is
that.
Quinn is a
holy.
very holy, except for gluttony. She's very holy. She's very holy.
What are you eating tonight, Quinn?
Oh.
Yeah, what are you eating tonight?
Submarina, if you want to sponsor us.
Was it a 12-inch sandwich this time?
No, it's just a regular sandwich.
Yeah, but how many of those sandwiches are there? That's the question.
There's that Mexican place right down the way, and they have two sizes of burritos. Human, wasn't it one called Human and Monster?
Excellent.
She always gets the
The monster burrito.
And then she's like, I'm still hungry.
Jeez.
We'll have to have an eating contest between you and Quinn one time.
I mean, there's.
Be fun.
I don't know, I have to find something she doesn't like. Do you like oysters? Oh, there you go. I'll win that one. I'll just have 2 oysters and beat her.
But today we went to a pizza place, and I had a regular 6-inch, and then we shared like a 2-piece pizza, and I finished that, and I was like, but right before, when I ordered, Chris was just like, you can get 12-inch. I'm like, no, I
Oh
can't.
my gosh, instigator.
Well, I know. She's going to be like hungry after. She's like, I should have.
It is All Souls Day. We feast. We
Yeah.
feast for all the souls that have gone before us. So, and we libate. But I would say, to answer your question, overall, I would recommend the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would overall blanketly recommend the show. I even recommended it to my mom.
Right, that's
so my elderly mother,
Yeah.
I recommended it to, and I would recommend it, just with the caveat that there is to people of faith. They touch on Catholic and Muslim directly. Do they have Jewish characters in this at all?
No.
But to any of the big 3, I would say just watch it knowing there's a weird monologue at the end that really reveals what the director's intentions were.
Right. They do show Judaism when he's in Israel and he's praying at the wall.
Yeah, that's right, the Wailing Wall.
And that's where the vampire's from.
Wailing Wall? Weeping Wall? Wailing Wall.
The Wailing Wall.
He was walking from. He got lost
Yeah.
from the Wailing
I mean, we won't ask how far the dude wandered in the desert before you find a uncovered tomb from 1,000+ years ago, but that was still pretty cool. It's like,
Each one of I thought that was kind of neat, even though it's totally implausible that a dementia-ridden old man could stumble upon a tomb that no archaeologist has ever found. Satellite technicians and whatever, like imagery analysts have not found this.
Any digging. It was just the wind was.
Yeah, the wind
blowing.
blew him into the thing. Yeah.
and inside it was perfectly free of sand.
Yeah.
But it was still cool.
Yeah.
I did like, before you knew what it was, just the creepiness too, when they see it on the island, and the eyes suddenly go up. You see all the cat eyes, and then the ones and that was freaky.
They were cool.
And she
horror
sees
elements.
it in her yard at one point.
Yeah.
And then when you first see it, and then his light goes off, and it's a little closer, and each time he's trying to light, and then it's like right there. So there was some good. I like that kind of stuff before you even knew what it was, and it was kind of.
I will say to people who are horror fans, and especially to ones who are not Catholic, like you'd probably love this show because just like all of his other shows, what's the name of the director again?
Flanagan. David Flanagan.
Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor. This one, they are not like traditional horror movies where there's a big bad monster that everyone needs to figure out how to beat. I guess this one does have a big bad monster, but it's obviously not about that. Yeah. Like the whole show, that's the plot device that gets you through the emotional journey of the characters. And
some of the humans, like Bev, are worse or as bad as the monster.
Yeah, Bev is worse. I mean, you don't want to Bev. I mean, Bev is like... So if the monster is like Sauron with the ring, right? Bev is like Saruman who's trying to get the ring. I think that's even worse, right? So yeah, I mean, horror fans will like this because we're so, like, as a horror genre fan, you just get tired of the same old thing, jump scares, lack of humanity, that kind of stuff. This show had a lot of what's missing from the horror genre in general.
Awesome.
So I would recommend it to horror fans. Just know, if you're not Catholic, this does not do the Catholic Church any justice in terms of like representing what actual parish life is like, and how we interpret the signs and symbols that you would that the demon brings to this community. And in our, like, what would be kind of cool is if the priest kind of turned around and was like, all right, I've been infected by this thing, but I need to fight it, and he's like throwing holy water at it. That'd be awesome. Like,
I don't know if it will affect this particular demon. I don't know if holy water will affect this particular demon.
Well, here's the thing. I just said that I didn't want that because that would be like every other horror movie. So I don't know. I guess just go ahead, watch it, and come to your own conclusion. Just know that in terms of portraying Catholicism, it did a good job with the liturgy, but parish life, kind of like just the Catholic world, like our bubble, was not really done justice in this show. But if you want to learn more about Catholicism, give us a call.
Keep tuning in.
Yeah, send us an email. Keep tuning in to our podcast, and we'll
see you next time.
Comment,
we'll see you next time.
And we'll see you next time.
All right. Take care.
All right.